These 5 wide receivers are poised to break out. Let's kick it off with Drake London. The former first-round pick finally has a real opportunity to show the world why he was taken first in a draft that had Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jameson Williams in it. The Falcons have been stuck in the mud over the past 2 years, relying on quarterbacks like Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, and Taylor Heineke, and also having a coach in Arthur Smith that overly commits to the run. Despite these bad situations, London has still been pretty productive. Last year he finished as the WR37, and he got the 24th most targets amongst all wide receivers. He also played the 28th most snaps, so he's on the field a ton, and I think with a new quarterback in town, he should really flourish. The Falcons brought in Kirk Cousins, and we've seen the impact he can have on wide receivers. Justin Jefferson is obviously a prime example. I'm not expecting London to put up numbers like that, but I do think he's definitely going to see a big uptick in his workload. I also expect big things for Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson. Let's not also forget that Raheem Morris is now the head coach, and he brought Zach Robinson with him to be the offensive coordinator. Both of these guys come from the Rams, so I'm assuming that this offense will have Sean McVay's imprints all over it. I'm expecting a lot more passes and a much more balanced offense than we've seen. Coming out of USC, London's comp was Marcus Colston, and he's 6'4", 215. He has a great catch radius. He's not the fastest, but this year, I'm expecting his red zone looks to be a lot higher, and I think he'll easily eclipse the 1,000-yard mark for the first time. It wouldn't be shocking to see him score more than the 6 touchdowns he scored cumulatively this season alone, and I think he's going to be the focal point of this offense. I also think that Kirk Cousins is going to be playing with a huge chip on his shoulder. I don't think he was happy about the fact that the Falcons drafted Michael Penix Jr., and we already know Cousins is a little bit notorious for stat padding, so I think he's out to prove to the Falcons that that was a mistake and that he still has it. The Falcons also have the easiest schedule, and there's not much behind London. They brought in Darnell Mooney and Ray McCloud, who are both talented in their own right, but they're not the talent that London is. London should pace the team in targets from a wide receiver position, and he should have a clear pathway to being the WR1 on this team. He's currently going in the 2nd round, which I think is absolutely appropriate, especially given the upside here. Next, let's talk about Jameson Williams. Williams really hasn't been on the field all that much over his first 2 years, but if you look at his college career, he has the makings of an absolute star. He was at OSU for the first 2 years before transferring to Alabama, where he went absolutely berserk. He nearly had 1,600 yards and went for 15 touchdowns in his 1 season at Alabama before tearing his ACL in the championship game. And the Lions still took him 12th overall. This guy is an absolute burner. We've only seen small sample sizes, but he has elite speed, and we've heard rave reviews about this speed in training camp all year this year. He missed most of his rookie year rehabbing that knee, and then he got suspended, costing him 4 games in year 2, so he really hasn't consistently had a chance to work on his craft. I think this is the first year he's fully healthy and should have ample opportunity to produce. With Josh Reynolds no longer in Detroit, the Lions are in need of another receiver behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. Reynolds leaves behind 64 targets, and I think almost all of those should go Williams' way, provided he stays healthy. Williams also benefits from the fact that the Lions were able to retain Ben Johnson, who was arguably one of the best offensive coordinators in the league and should be a head coach sooner rather than later. He's extremely creative, and I'm sure he'll find ways to get Williams the ball in a number of ways. Even last year, we saw him sprinkled in as a rusher, and that proved to be successful. This team knows how to score points. They had the 5th most per game last year, scoring a little bit over 27, and they love to pass the ball. Jared Goff had the 2nd most pass attempts of any quarterback in the league last year, and I don't see that formula changing this year. The Lions should still be very run-heavy behind Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, but that's only going to open up the play action for this offense. I think this team is going to be extremely potent, and if Williams can take advantage of his opportunity, he could be the steal of the draft. He's currently going in the 10th round, and I think that's an absolute bargain. I'm going to reach for him closer to the 8th. Next, let's talk about Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers finished as the WR30 last year, and he had a great rookie season on his way to a 77, 858, 5 line. And I think he's poised to break out and build on that. Him and Mark Andrews are going to be the 1 and 2 option this year. This offense is going to run through them and Derrick Henry, and I think with Todd Monken improving this passing offense like we saw last year, he's going to be a big beneficiary. Lamar Jackson had 24 passing touchdowns last year, which is a step up from his previous 2 years. Odell Beckham is also no longer on the team, leaving behind 64 vacated targets, and the other receivers in this room are not as talented as Flowers. They have Rashad Bateman, who at this point, unfortunately, has kind of been a first-round bust, and Nelson Aguilar, who we kind of know what to expect from. Flowers had the 20th most snaps amongst all wide receivers last year, so he does not come off of the field. And he also had the 26th most targets, so he's getting volume aplenty. At 5'9", 182, I'm expecting him to continue to operate out of the slot largely, and he's an elite route runner. This guy is a yak monster. He does damage with the ball in his hand, so I think he's a much better pick in PPR and has a safer floor in PPR, but he's good in any type of league. At this point, he's going in the 5th round, which I think is absolutely fair. Number 4 is the highlight reel himself, George Pickens. Pickens finished as the WR29 last year, but he really came on towards the end of the year. In week 16, he finished as the WR2, and in week 17, he finished as the WR9. And hopefully he can build off of that progress. Deontay Johnson and Allen Robinson are no longer on the team, leaving behind 154 targets. So even though the quarterback situation is a bit uncertain in Pittsburgh, I think Pickens is going to get all the work he can handle. Last year, he played the 16th most snaps amongst all wide receivers and had the 28th most targets. This team wants him on the field, and given his talent, he deserves to be. He finished the year with a league-leading 18.1 yards per catch, and he went over 1,000 yards for the first time, and I think this year he should go well over 1,000 yards and have close to 6 to 8 touchdowns. I personally am expecting Russell Wilson to start the year, and he loves the long ball, and this team is going to be committed to the run with Arthur Smith being the new offensive coordinator. We saw his influence in Atlanta, so I think this team is going to be heavily reliant on Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, which should hopefully open up the play action. We've seen that work in Tennessee for Smith with Henry and Ryan Tannehill, and hopefully that works for him here. The only other real receiving threat on this offense is Pat Freiermuth, who hasn't been a model of health unfortunately, and even if he gets a heavy workload, it's not going to affect Pickens. The only thing that could really impact Pickens at this point is if that Brandon Ayuk trade goes through. If that were to happen, that may change the equation a bit, but I still think Pickens is a WR1 for this team. Pickens is currently going in the 5th round, and I think that's a good spot for him. I would probably take him around there, maybe a little bit earlier, but if he falls to you in that round, don't hesitate grabbing him. Lastly, he's already a star, but I think his ceiling is even higher. I want to talk about Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson finished as the WR26 last year, and it's nothing short of amazing that he's been able to go over 1,000 yards in both of his first 2 seasons, having Zach Wilson as his quarterback predominantly. If Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy, there's no telling what type of numbers he could produce. Wilson's elite route running, coupled with Rodgers' ability to throw receivers open, should make for one of the most dominant 1-2 punches in the league this year. I'm expecting Wilson to have career highs in both yards and touchdowns. We saw Devontae Adams have his best seasons under Nathaniel Hackett, and I'm expecting him to have a positive influence on Wilson as well. Even though they weren't the most quality targets, he still had the 4th most amongst all wide receivers, and he played the 7th most snaps, so the Jets are going to give him all the work he can handle. They also brought in Mike Williams, who's a field stretcher and should take off the top for this offense and should take some defensive attention away from Wilson. And Breece Hall should be fully healthy at this point. He should be able to handle a full workload, which should also help Wilson's case. Currently, Wilson's going around the 1-2 turn, which is pretty expected, but he may be the steal of the 1st or 2nd round. Those are 5 wide receivers that are poised to break out. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and let me know which receivers you think are going to break out in the comments below.